What is consciousness? The live stream of consciousness is on a quest to unravel the mystery of existence. Every episode, we ask the fundamental question that has captivated human minds for centuries. Is consciousness merely a product of our brains, or does it connect us to something greater? Explore the very fabric of our thoughts. Don't miss a moment. Expand your awareness and tap into the boundless potential that resides within you. Welcome to the live stream of consciousness.
Yes, yes, yes. Welcome to the live stream of consciousness. I love how excited Jesse gets, even though he's not here. What is consciousness? Right, and I can't even believe that it's been 2 years now, I think, and we still haven't figured it out. No, that's not true. We have definitely figured it out. We've added to the collective consciousness the definition of consciousness. We've really expanded on it. I think we've seen it from so many perspectives, which is cool, and I think that's part of the idea of what consciousness even is, right? So it's great that we're getting to share perspectives and with each other and talk about it. I love to connect people and consciousnesses and everybody here. This is my favorite place. It's Thursday, September 7th. Can you freaking believe it? The summer is starting to appear in the rearview mirror, and it's I hate to say this, but have to, because this is what I feel like. It's every year. It's like Christmas is coming, right? I even saw some posts on Facebook that they have Christmas trees in like Home Depot or whatever it might be in the mainstream. Let's call it the mainstream, because I don't really shop at Home Depot and I don't really buy Christmas trees every year and all of that stuff. But anyway, it is the live stream of consciousness. I am rambling as usual. Ninja Kitty says there's a hurricane named after me. I didn't realize what the hurricanes. There was a hurricane named Ninja Kitty. I didn't see that one. But anyway, it's good to see everybody. I'm excited. It's been 2 years of this amazing quest of what is consciousness. We've had some really cool conversations. And tonight's guest is actually a return guest. It's Hurricane Lee. I see. It's a return guest because on Facebook we're friends, and I was making some comments. She was making some comments, and we were just like, "Yeah, man, right, righteous. That's righteous," because we believe in the same things, and that's always nice. And I started talking. I was like, "How do we know each other again?" And she's like, "Oh, I was on your show." So I invited her back. And she's doing some new things, and I'm excited for tonight's conversation. I mentioned it might get a little bit spicy because we're going to talk about love and relationships, which is not something that we talk about normally here, although we do talk about love and relationships in a different way than I think we're going to talk about it tonight. But welcome to the live stream of consciousness, Cassandra Vitale. How you doing, Cassandra?
Hi, I'm great. I'm so well. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. And it's funny because I don't make a big deal out of it, but I'm very aware of, like, my name Michael, right? People say, "Hey, what do you like, Mike or Michael?" And when people ask me, I say I prefer Michael. When they don't ask me, I just, they call me Mike, which is fine also, right? But I notice it, right? And with all of my guests, I don't always know how to pronounce their name. So I'm like, okay, I think it's Cassandra because that's how I'm pronouncing my name. And then maybe it's Cassandra. And then I'm thinking, I think that's like a Long Island pronunciation of Cassandra. So how do you pronounce your name? Cassandra?
I say Cassandra.
You do say Cassandra. Okay. And then I was like, oh, Anne is also, a proper female name. So Cassandra would also make sense. So I didn't think it was necessarily only a Long Island access.
Well, that's funny you say that. I mean, my dad is originally from New York, and I live in New York now. So,
okay.
Cassandra.
Cassandra, exactly.
I don't usually correct people, but thanks for asking.
You're welcome. You're welcome, and welcome to the show. And the quiet healer, Janice, is out there. What's up, Janice? Welcome.
Hi.
So I know you were here before, and as I was saying, we've asked the question over and over, and we still haven't figured it out. It's not that we haven't figured it out; it's that we love asking the question. And I love the statement that you can't stand in the same river twice, right? And
Yeah.
that, you know, the meaning of that is that the water's flowing, the river is never actually physically the same at any given moment. So I believe that about my guests also. So I'm going to reiterate the question, and we may have or may not have been doing this when you were on the show last. I think we probably were at this point, but the
I don't
kind of
remember.
the ritual of the show has become to get everybody's perspective and ask the question, what is consciousness? So Cassandra, what is consciousness? Cassandra.
um, I mean, I think consciousness is awareness.
Okay.
And in your intro, I liked your intro for the show because it was something about does consciousness happen in our brain, or does it connect us to something greater? Right? Isn't that something what it isn't
Yep,
that
yep,
concept?
yep.
So I don't think that it's just like in our brain or it connects us to something greater. I think we are the thing that's greater. And
I
so
love that.
and are you familiar with Neil Donald Walsh at all? His writings? Anyway,
The name, no, but maybe some of the writings,
he's
possibly.
he's written, I think, Conversations with God. I want to
I'm
say
familiar with that.
I
Okay.
might be wrong about that. Anyway, his whole thing was like, what does the omniscient? What did the omniscient not know? And what the omniscient didn't know was what it was like to not know.
Mm,
And so that's why he created humans.
I love that.
And so, like, we are like God or consciousness's way of knowing, like not knowing and then knowing, so
Right.
forgetting and then remembering, like like the
Sure.
realization
Yeah.
of being God, or to me, that's consciousness, so becoming
Okay.
aware and the
Okay.
awareness that exists.
Well, so then you're almost saying the actually becoming not aware, and then
And then
the
becoming aware.
path of becoming aware,
Yeah.
becoming not aware in order to become aware.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's what it is for us.
Yeah.
That's as far as we can go with our little monkey brains, I guess.
I'm right there with you. I agree. I often say, you know, there's like I know enough to know that I can't know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, because it's beyond my comprehension, but the concept is within my comprehension, right? The concept of knowing something, that is beyond my comprehension is,
Yeah.
I can know that, right? So if I can understand that, then it must be.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I
So,
think
yeah.
that's why we live in the world. We're sort of in two, there's like two converging like eras. And one of them is like the era of data, and one of them is the era of transformation. And I think that transformation, we're increasing our awareness and consciousness, and one of the ways that we're doing that is through data and analyzing data and having all of this information that we can analyze and then make discoveries or whatever. And then at the same time we have transformation, which is sort of more of a spiritual pursuit, but that's also increasing consciousness.
Interesting. I like that. I totally love what you're saying. The fact that technology has actually become a part of that evolution, right? They kind of affect each other.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And Grace Grella is in the audience. What's up, Grace Grella? Welcome. Good to see you. Yeah, I love that answer. I think that's a great answer. I'm gonna have to go back and listen again and maybe get a good little sound clip out of that one. I love the library that we're creating here, you know, going back and looking at the shows and just taking little sound clips of what is consciousness and people's little twists on the perception of what it is. And I love, again, I'm just going to go back to it just so I can remember it. The idea that consciousness is the idea of becoming unaware in order to become aware. That's really awesome. I love that. Then maybe you could tell me, maybe you remember if we did this the last time you were on the show, the second kind of line of business before we get into the conversation about you and what you do, was to kind of relate a story or a memory of a moment where you kind of realized things were more than what you're taught in school, you know, more than kind of the basics, going to work and coming home and, you know, reading, writing, arithmetic. You know, there's something else there. I know you do yoga and meditation and those kinds of things. So
Sure.
do you have a memory or a story to share of when you realized there was something else?
I mean, I think I definitely did answer this question last time, but like you said, telling the story won't be the same, I'm sure, the second time around. I mean, first of all, I grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school. So I was in church, and I was being told that there was God and there was Jesus, and there was sort of this energy, or at least that somebody was always watching. And we had to behave a certain kind of way, and we're praying, and we're asking God to forgive us, or asking him to give us abundance or whatever, right? Heal us. And we had to spend a lot of time worshiping. And school, church, it didn't really make a lot of sense to me. So I was always kind of having my wheels turning, where I was like, this doesn't all the way make sense. And one of the things that didn't make sense to me was that we were told that God is everywhere and everything, and so he's always watching, right? There's that piece. But I was always like, if God is everywhere and everything, then aren't we God? Like, why would we need to go to church? Like, how are we separate from that?
Right.
And this was just my little, like, I don't know, 8-year-old brain trying to figure it out. And I think that led me to being both very cynical and very skeptical, but also I think just being in church all the time and in this mystical place, if you walk into a church, like, it's very meditative, it's very peaceful, it's very otherworldly, especially if you're the only one in there. And so I think there was a part of me that was curious, or at least believed that there was something else going on, though I didn't really buy the story that I was given.
Sure.
So I was really into, like, Ouija boards when I was in elementary school with my girlfriends, and we were very into witches and witchcraft and magic, and so I was always very sort of attracted to that. And then as I got older, I'm wearing the shirt. I tried some hallucinogenic plants, and I always had very mystical experiences. I thought a lot about God and Jesus, a lot. And part of it probably is just that I was indoctrinated into, you know, Catholicism. And so that was a framework that I had for, you know, the mystical. Right. But I feel like there's a lot of people who were Catholic that didn't have that experience. I don't know.
They didn't have that experience. Well, I mean, so let me answer your question, because for me, you know, I agree. I think that organized religion, there are aspects of organized religion that, you know, like the aspect of worshiping a lot, right? Like, to me, the question when I was a kid was, if there's like God is everywhere and everything, why does it need me to worship it? You know, like, why would it care? Like, I couldn't imagine that it would even want that. You know what I mean? So there were some things that didn't make sense. Right. And I think so organized religion, and I think certain concepts that are kind of designed to control, you know what I mean, and aspects of things. What's up, kitty?
Got my little, he want to say hi.
Beautiful. So yeah, I mean, I certainly can understand, you know, definitely a lot of people who are telling me the story of, you know, the spiritual realizations talk about being brought up in a very religious household. You know, I was brought up in a Jewish household, but the same thing, going to temple and worshiping, you know, didn't really feel right to me. But like you said, like a house of worship had an energy to it, right? There's a connection to there's a connection to it. So back to the question I was going to ask was, where you're at now, do you see the correlation between the story of God and Jesus and what that kind of means and how it has been translated? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think Catholic mysticism is amazing if you go deeper than just the stories, which are parables, and the more esoteric interpretations of the stories and how it's all really symbolic. I agree, because I think it is a map and a way to understand ourselves, and a way to increase your consciousness.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And
I mean,
Jesus did that too, or he was one. He's sort of like, whether or not he was a real person, he's a great example of someone who
representation.
tried to
Right.
do that. Yeah.
Right. Right. And actually, that's just what I was going to just say was one of my favorite things that comes from religion. And I struggled with the word God for a long time because of organized religion. But one of my favorite terms is God is love.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus is love. Like that resonates with me 1,000,000%. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, that makes sense, you know? So cool. Awesome. So you always kind of had this realization, and you've always had a connection to kind of this higher energy and
Yeah.
you know,
I'm
ultimate.
an intuitive witchy person for sure. And I've been since I was a little girl, and now I am even more.
Awesome. So I created a banner here, and we talked a little bit about it for your website, CassandraVitale.com, which you said was not necessarily 100% up to date, but there are links to all of your social media on there as well, which I think is probably has some current ways to get in touch with you. So I just want that scrolling at the bottom for as we get into our conversation, if people are interested in the things that you're talking about,
Yeah.
which I think they might be. And I want to also, just before we get to some of the hopefully spicy stuff, I just want to talk about how you got there. So some of the stuff that's on your website currently,
Sure.
doing yoga and the thing I was talking about earlier, I was looking at your website, and there was something that you do. Some of the healing that you do involves EFT techniques, and I was looking that up. And an electronic fund transfer came up, and I'm like, I don't think that's what she's talking about. So why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us what is EFT and how is that relevant to you and what you do and your journey?
EFT tappings. Most people have at least heard of tapping, where you tap on your face or you tap on different parts of your body. It stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques.
Mhm.
And it comes from the discipline called thought field therapy, but it's basically an East meets West somatic healing modality. It's a mixture of American psychology, neurolinguistic programming, and yeah, it is. It's tapping, the quiet healer. Yes, same thing. Um, and Chinese medicine. So you're tapping on acupressure points,
Mhm.
and then you're talking, and you're sort of going on a little journey. So it is somewhat hypnotic in that you activate relaxing brain waves, like alpha brain waves or theta brain waves.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there is science behind it. Like the
Mhm.
VA hospital has done quite a bit of trials on it, and they have deemed it safe and effective for PTSD.
Oh wow.
So thankfully there's some science behind it, even though it does feel kind of like a wooey magical thing. It does link your hemispheres in your brain
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
rewire your brain to help you change your peptide pathways, your peptide addictions. So essentially, what it aims to do really is get you away from being addicted to upsetting thoughts and unpleasant emotions,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
have you basically get addicted to happy thoughts that work for your life and pleasant emotions, ideally.
Interesting. So I'm going to endorse the whole idea. I know you said it sounds a little weird, and it does even sound weird to me, especially before I actually experienced it. It was sounding very weird, and even if you watch it, it kind of seems a little weird. But and is it related to? I think where I experienced it was through I was doing like some qigong stuff for a while, just kind of some energy. It's an energy technique, right? I mean, it's
Mm.
so it was probably through one of those videos, but there were some tapping exercises where you would tap on different areas, and they were guiding you through it. And like you said, there was kind of some, I guess, some intentional direction that they
Yes.
were giving you, right? To direct how you were affecting your energy. But there was also, like, I guess they were talking about the actual physical stimulation part of it, which you could feel, and there definitely was something to it. I will say that. Like
Sure.
it felt like I was doing something energetic.
Yeah.
Moving energy around or tapping into it somehow.
Emotions are energy in motion. Emotions occur in the body. And many of us have just been taught to start to either repress, suppress, or intellectualize our emotions. And none of that allows us to process the chemical reaction. So when we have an unpleasant thought that creates, let's say, anger, that is a chemical that actually, a hormone, right, that gets moved through your system. It's a chemical thing that's occurring, and it has to complete itself. The reaction that the chemical going through your system has to complete itself. And if it doesn't complete itself, then the residues stay in your system, in your bloodstream, basically, in your body. And our bodies are so smart that they know what to do with stuff that's not really supposed to be there. So they'll take that residue and they'll put it in your liver or your spleen, or they store it in your organs. Your body stores it in its organ.
So this is the whole kind of concept behind dis-ease, right?
Yeah.
The whole
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's what it was.
So you'll essentially just get blocked. If we have an electromagnetic field, right? Our heart, our brain emit electricity. If our magnet is not able to actually emit electricity, that affects our field, which then affects our entire perception, and of ourselves and the world, and yes, that it will cause disease because things can't flow. There's something in the way, and it's bad emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't really think of emotions as being bad, but there are unpleasant ones that we've been taught to suppress.
Right. It's not the emotions that are bad. It's the way we've been taught to process them, like you're saying.
And sometimes it doesn't feel good. It's very intense.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, maybe later, I don't know if there's a short demonstration of tapping or something we can get into, but I want to talk about so many things first before we do that. I just know I love that on the show when we get into an actual demo of something like that. I think people really get into it. Even do like breathing or something. Okay, so
if we have time, for sure.
Yeah. So you also yoga, you were getting into a whole bunch of different spiritual things, I guess, at once, right? That was your focus at that point, or is that still your focus now? Because I know we were talking about marketing and other things. That's more your focus now, right?
I sort of can't pinpoint one thing because I find a way to put them all together. I was a yoga instructor and trainer for 15 years, and I owned a yoga studio in Southern California for 5 years.
Okay.
I decided to close it during COVID. And that freed me from having a brick and mortar business. And I basically took all those skills and started a marketing firm with my boyfriend. Right now it's all custom. We do strategy and implementation, and we also do a lot of business consulting and coaching. So it, just kind of depends on what kind of business you have and what your marketing needs are. And we'll build out your funnel or your website or your emails or, writing copy. We have a team. And so we can do all that kind of everyday practical stuff. Excellent. And we're both artists, creatives. So it's fun to get into people's businesses. And we generally only work with businesses that are doing something good in the world.
Okay.
So good. I like to think of it as a way to leverage impact, where if I'm helping somebody who's doing something good in the world, then it's like a ripple effect.
Yeah, right? I love that. Yep, totally.
So that's the business side of things. And I do spend time talking about marketing. And and then I also still do relationship and sex coaching for women. Occasionally I help them with their businesses depending on what their needs are, or if they're
right. No, I love that you said that, because I feel like that's just a microcosm of life, right? Is that all the different skills that you pick up during the way, you kind of keep adding them to who you are and what you do, you know what I mean? And then, like you said, they kind of find a way to act together. I think that even though it's not necessarily current, I do want to just bring this up because the way you were just talking about marketing, right? So this is your website. It's not woo woo. It's the true you. That's like, I love that. I mean, the live stream of consciousness is a play on words, right? And I love play on words, and that's just like, that's also a great marketing technique, right? To kind of play on words like that.
Oh yeah, totally. My boyfriend made that tagline for my website. He came up with it after talking to me about my business. So.
Right. It's not woo woo. It's the true you, right?
Yeah, that's what healing is, or spirituality is, or whatever. I think sometimes we want to say like that's outside of me, versus like, no, it's actually inside of us.
Right. That's right. Totally. I love that. Awesome. That's very cool. So I have Robert from another podcast who we've been talking with, the Q for You podcast. He says, so you won't be willing to help me with my evil corporation startup?
I mean, for the right price, Robert, you hit me up. I'm still Slytherin house. I defense against the dark arts most of the time, but I mean, you know, I like money, so let's talk.
Everybody has their price. Oh, I just
in general, though, we're trying to do good in the world and make the world a place where we actually want to live. So
that's funny. So I'm give me a second. I'm taking a picture of the screen here because I just got a text from Jesse. I want to show him that I'm talking to you on the show.
Oh, cool.
That's so funny. Yeah, so I'm basically telling him you said hello by sending him a shot of you on the show.
That's awesome.
Very cool. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about this now, this turn where you're at, and why I said the conversation might get a little spicy. How did you, first of all, decide that this connects to relationships and love, and then we'll talk about specifically how you want to empower women, I guess.
Well, I studied anthropology in college and grad school, and cultural anthropology. So people in general, I've always found extremely fascinating, and culture. And one thing, for whatever reason, that in my studies of spirituality and psychology and emotions, relationships has always come up. People were telling me about what was going on in their relationships. And I would say I was one of the few friends of some of my girlfriends who, instead of saying like, oh yeah, he's a total jerk, dump him, or you're totally right, he's awful, I would ask them more questions, like about how they were behaving in the relationship.
I remember that, right? From
you know, or what do you actually want to happen? Do you want to just complain about him forever, or whatever? And I started to see that I sort of have a special talent to see what's going on underneath the surface and read between the lines. And it's not just romantic relationships. Everything is a relationship. Our relationship with ourselves, right? Yep. Our relationship with our business, our relationship with our parents, our relationship with coworkers, friends, whoever.
Yep.
So, and also I've done a lot of sales training and studied sales. And in order to be good at sales, you have to be able to talk to people.
Right.
And that's a relationship too. Like,
totally.
Sales used to be so, you know, when something feels salesy, it feels like they're trying to pull one over on you. And maybe it's because their product isn't actually that great.
Right.
But if you have a really good product, then there's no reason why you can't just be buds with the person and try to help them out. And then if it makes sense, they'll buy it. Right. But you have to actually be buds with them.
Right. It's interesting what you're saying. So I just want to kind of reflect this back to you. The idea that, you know, relationships, how important they are and what they mean. And really, I like the idea that you're almost like, you know, you would be talking to your girlfriends and you were almost ready to be like, well, wait a second. A relationship is two parties accountable for, you know, whatever the situation is. Right.
Yeah.
You know, I really love that. Now, oh my God, my train of thought my thought just flew out of my head what I was getting at specifically. So I'm gonna go back to the idea that, you know, your response to people complaining about their relationship was like, wait a second, you need to look at what you're contributing to this. It was the whole idea of energy exchange. So I call
Oh,
that energy exchange, right?
yeah.
I mean, a relationship is an energy exchange, and that's
Yes,
any relationship you have. I even at one point I was like, I have an energy exchange with the chair when I sit down on the chair. You know what I
totally.
mean? It's like it's not just animate objects, it's inanimate objects, it's
Yeah,
everything around you. And I think kind of just being aware of that has really helped me. And as you're saying, communication and sales, that's super important. And I've said this before on the show, like Jesse's the one who got me on this side of the camera. I was always just producing the show. I'm a
mhm,
technical guy, and you know, a photographer and a videographer, so I like to express myself being behind the camera. But this has really improved my life in so many ways, just being able to talk to people and being able to socialize in a much, you know, a much more effective way, you know.
totally.
Yeah, so I do think it's important. I do think that people aren't taught that, you know, like you said, sales, the whole idea of being a salesman has this kind of stigma to it,
Yeah,
you know what
it
I
can.
mean?
Mhm.
And it really, it's important. If everybody was a better salesman, I think we'd be better off, you know. Everybody would get along better, you know. And you also mentioned there has to be an authenticity to it.
Sure. I mean, my style is that I actually want to help you.
Right.
So, and if my thing isn't going to help you, then I'm not going to try and get you to buy it.
Exactly.
Like, I think my thing can help you, and if I don't, then I'm going to tell you what will, or tell you thank you, goodbye, or whatever. I'm not going to try
Right.
to buy it.
Right. No, and I think maybe that's why you kind of, you know, at one point you were doing yoga and these things that you thought would help people, but that's not like the only thing, right? There are other
Oh,
things that
yeah.
you learned and took on
Yeah.
and said, oh, wait a second, I like this. This is, I feel comfortable, you know, like you said, your girlfriends were coming to you and saying things, and you just intuitively were like, wait a second, and just because you responded the way you did and you are who you are, you helped
Yeah.
them, and you
Yeah. I
started
mean,
saying, oh, wait a second, maybe I can start charging these girls for this.
yeah. Yeah. I've had a lot of relationships, and I had to learn all my sort of, uh, for lack of a better word right now, toxic behaviors. I had to see them in myself and figure out where they came from, and recognize them in my partner, and
Mhm.
figure out how to both be a better partner and have compassion. It's not all just like, oh, I'm such a terrible toxic person.
Right,
It's
right,
like
right. Of course. Yeah,
gentleness,
yeah.
compassion
Well,
for.
accountability goes both ways. You want to also be treated the right way. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? You don't want to just, yeah, absolutely. So, all right. So I'm always usually talking and listening and not trying to think of the next thing, but my head is actually, I'm thinking of all these questions, and one of them is, um, kind of the differences between men and women. So
mhm,
so you talk about like these specific toxic traits that people maybe don't realize that they're contributing into their relationship.
sure.
These very similar for men and women? Are they very different for men and women?
So for straight men and straight women in the United States, which is usually who I talk to,
Hmm.
I think it's possible that you can apply a lot of what I say to any gender and any person, any orientation. I usually work with straight people
Hmm.
who look, a man who looks like a man, a woman who looks like a woman, they're straight. They like each other, right? That's sort of my usual realm.
Hmm.
Although I'm open to working with whoever. That's just how I am. So
Sure.
I try not to
Sure.
speak on things that I don't have a ton of experience on, right? So
Sure.
that's my caveat. Having that said, based on that sample, there are a lot of patterns.
Yeah. Yeah, I see, and the reason I'm asking that is because I always see people, you know, a lot of generalizations. Men are this way, women are that way, and I'm just like, wait a second, people are that way. It's not
Yeah.
just men or
Oh,
women. You know
no,
what I
that's
mean? Like,
fair. I mean, I think that there are a lot. The common dynamic is often that women overperform and are controlling, and
mhm,
men underperform and
mhm,
act and weaponize incompetence. That's a common pattern that we see in relationships and marriages.
Okay.
And then there's other ones. There's situations where the man is sort of doing everything and controlling everything, and the woman perhaps is not holding up her end of whatever that deal is and contributing in the things that like maybe originally were promised and then later stopped happening, or like you said, it's all about exchange. So there are transactional like elements to all relationships.
Right.
We don't want to devolve them to being only transactional, although sometimes that's
Right. But I mean, again, it's not just a transaction. It's intention, it's accountability. You know, I mean, there's all these different aspects to how we treat each other. You know, what I mean? Yeah.
Desire.
Yeah.
I actually want to do these transactions with you and not with someone else.
Right, absolutely. And so you were kind of getting to what my thought was, that there are kind of probably specific traits that, you know, just more heavy in men and more heavy in women, although that it's not a hard and fast rule, you know what I mean? There's certainly, you know, what's the word?
There's always outliers and there's always exceptions, and you know, I mean, if you look at it from polarity, like masculine, feminine, we all have both of those energies inside of us. And women tend to have maybe a little more on the feminine energy and a little less on the masculine energy, or men tend to, and this is the population that I know best, tend to be more masculine and tend to be a little less feminine. And if a person whose natural proclivity is toward being more masculine and something's not right and they're not acting that way, that could show that they don't feel good and they're depressed or something. Or a woman who would rather be more feminine but who's in fight or flight all the time would be exhibiting like a more masculine trait and be more controlling, and you know, or a man who's lost connection to his purpose and his masculine power, perhaps be more feminine.
So do you think that there's, and I definitely don't want to get into any sort of controversial territory, although, you know, I mean,
for some people, even me saying masculine and feminine is controversial, but
yeah, no, that's true. But I guess my question was going to be, do you feel like there's some sort of purpose towards a more masculine role and a more feminine role, and how they would work together? I mean,
I do. I mean, like I said, I come from anthropology. So if we're looking at even evolutionarily speaking, there were roles that people had and they fulfilled a purpose.
Sure. I mean, you know, listen, there are species that, you know, it's not a male or female that can get pregnant, right? I mean, it's like both, right? Or it's asexual.
There's hermaphrodite animal species, right?
Yeah. So I mean, you know, specifically for our species, there are definitely those roles. At least we know that, right? I mean,
and I think in the modern world we have much less of a need to have a super polarized population where we don't. I mean, I'm sure the evil corporations would love to send more people to war or whatever, but in general, we don't really need that. We don't live in that type of world anymore. We don't need that as much. Like women can go be in the army or can go be a car mechanic or whatever. Maybe we
right. Yeah, and even though I'm saying I'm kind of saying, hey, I support the idea that there are masculine roles and feminine roles. I also certainly, you know, I don't see any problems with a feminine man or a feminine, you know, I mean, an effeminate man or a masculine woman.
Sure.
You know, I mean, you know, there's certainly, you know, I mean, there's no problems with that.
No, of course. To me, it's all about choice. If that person wants to be doing that, then great. I support that.
You know what? You said something earlier that also rang a bell in my head, and I wanted to ask you, and I skipped over it and I forgot it. I'm not gonna remember exactly where you said it, but Q for you is reminding me. You said about a masculine trait about weaponizing competence. Was it that you said weaponizing? Incompetent, weaponizing incompetence. So what does that mean exactly? I also didn't kind of understand what you meant by that.
It's like where I mean, I think anybody can do it. I don't think it's completely on one gender or the other. But if you go on TikTok, you can find a million videos of women complaining about their husbands essentially pretending to not know how to do tasks in the home, or not, trying not to learn how to become competent at the many tasks that are required to maintain a household: childcare, loading the dishwasher, doing laundry.
Oh, like not doing laundry, something like that.
Making appointments for the kids, doctor's appointments, just things that require you to remember details or follow a set of steps. I don't know how to do that, or doing it and then doing it incorrectly and then being told, well, you didn't really do it right, and then saying, well, that means I can't ever do it because I can't do it right.
Wow, I would never even have thought of that. Like that's a big problem in relationships. See, I'm really big on like accountability, right? So just the idea that there are people who are just so unaccountable, it's kind of baffling for me. It's like
yes, exactly.
And Keith, you're saying, oh,
it's
the
exactly
husband.
that. There's entire TikTok channels devoted to exactly that scenario.
Wow.
men not knowing where their own belongings are in their own house.
Wow.
And some of it is a dynamic issue where, for whatever, people are blaming the mother-in-law, right? Like, why didn't you teach your kid how to do chores around the house, right? Or whatever. But some of it is the woman's, she's in a survival mode and she is being controlling and actually not setting the guy up to win.
Mm-hmm.
And then the guy is also, he's getting something out of also not having to do these things. So it's like there's a little bit of a power trip and a power struggle, and everyone's sort of getting a payoff from the dysfunction. And so it can be hard to remedy.
Right. It's, Q for you says, where's my super suit? Yeah, it's kind of sad to me of the things society did to us as humanity. I mean, it's like, people are just so wrapped up in their own needs and not aware of how they treat other people.
Yes.
And have these kind of entitlements and expectations. And I just feel like if everybody would just treat everybody the way they wanted to be treated, those basics that organized religion was supposed to be based on, do unto others, that kind of thing. It's amazing how they sound so simple, and I think a lot of people probably don't even realize, like, oh wow, I am not doing unto others as I would want done unto me. They don't even realize it's not like intentional, or malevolent. It's just I don't know. I don't want to say ignorant because
it is
ignorant. Put it out there, you know what I mean? It's like
it's usually they're unaware of their own inner workings. They're unaware of their own impulses, unaware of their own thought processes. Is actually unconscious to them that their way of getting needs met is manipulative.
Right.
Because the alternative would be having to ask for it directly.
Mm-hmm.
And that's scary, or something happened to them when they were a kid that made them think it's not safe to do that. Right. And then, what is it? What tangled webs we weave. And then, it just turns into this whole mess where you're really just trying to get attention, or you're really just trying to make sure you feel safe in your home or whatever. But there's all this roundabout ways of getting it that hurt people.
Right. So I guess when it comes to relationships, and I guess I want to kind of move into how you belong to and have created, I guess, a bunch of groups specifically for women, right?
Sure. Yeah. Over the years, I have done lots of things. I had a podcast for a while. You can find it on Spotify. Sad Intellectual Hotties.
Tell us
But
about that. What was that all about?
that was definitely largely about my foray into trying polyamory and then my subsequent divorce. So it's actually, you'll see all the tea about me trying thinking that I wanted to be polyamorous, but really I just wanted to leave my husband. But we did a lot of really cool psychology myth debunking myths and talking about cultural phenomenons and purity culture, which is sort of like the Western obsession with thinness, whiteness, purity,
Wow.
shame, all that kind of thing.
Right.
So I had a kink circle for a while. So it was a group where we would get together and talk. That sort of turned into relationship coaching mostly. I used to host red tent nights. So women would come together and we would do ceremony and we would talk about our periods and our cycle.
I was going to say, I feel like out of the loop, and I guess I should be out of the loop on that. I don't know. I've never been invited to a red tent.
I was going to say, you probably would not have been invited.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think that's, I think it's really interesting to me because I definitely travel in some spiritual circles, and there is certainly a lot more groups devoted to divine feminine than the masculine. And it's interesting. I've been thinking about kind of trying to maybe do some empathy training for men,
Cool.
Something like that. But I am certainly interested in, so how can I say this? I'm interested in the connection between kink, I guess, or less kink, let's say more sexuality,
Sure.
And relationships, and I guess again from a feminine and masculine point. So I know, from my experiences, I consider myself a fairly sexual guy, right? I'm interested in it, and it's I guess that's it. I'm interested in it, right? So that makes me feel like I'm fairly sexual. But I know that from my relationships throughout my life, like some people aren't sexual.
True.
You know what I mean? And that's okay. You know what I mean? And I guess my question would be like, what is the correlation between relationships and sexuality as far as happiness and successful relationships goes?
Well, everything kind of goes back to my thoughts about anthropology. I mean, I think everything that humans really do is to serve sex and sexual relationships, essentially reproduction. So I think everything that we do is really so that we can have sex with each, all the stuff that we build still sort of comes back around to like wanting to have sex and reproduce. I mean, I guess from the animalistic side, but also that's how we exist. So I don't think people would have any reason to have a lot of the relationships they have if sex wasn't part of the equation. And I think that just like drives us to do so much.
Well, I guess, okay, so I'm asking that question because I mean, I'm in a very happy relationship, but I certainly hear a lot about unhappy relationships, right?
Sure.
People complaining about, like you said, your girlfriend's complaining to you about their relationships all the time. And if I probably had the patience to listen to it more, because again, my immediate response is kind of like, well, it takes two people to tango, you know what I mean? And if you're complaining, there's probably two sides to the story, you know what I mean?
Totally.
And so, which is why I, like I said, when I say I'm in a happy relationship, I'm glad that there's no thought of ever even putting energy into complaining, about any aspect of my relationship,
Well, you guys probably work it out with each other, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. A million percent.
Yeah. I mean, sexuality exists on a spectrum. There are some people who are super sexual, beyond what we would consider to be normal, and there are people who are not interested in any way whatsoever, and that's also what we would consider to be outside the norm, but that all exists, right? So yeah, you're gonna have people get together who have different desires or needs or interests. And it is still sort of a marketplace, and it is still one of the many transactions that can occur in a relationship. So it is something that is kind of being traded. I mean, I think that is, if you boil it down to transaction. Obviously there's an entire like spiritual connection that can also happen through sex.
Right.
It makes it more than just something you're trading or just pleasure or just making a baby. And I would say probably many people choose their partner because they're experiencing more than just the transaction with them. They're experiencing something deeper. But
yeah,
we also know that that's not always the case.
Right. No, I could totally relate to that. I feel like that makes a lot of sense to me. All right, so we have about 10 minutes left before the hour. I mean, not that we have to do a hard stop or anything like that, but I was interested in getting a little spicy. So tell me exactly, you said something about you belong to a kink circle, or you started a kink circle.
I was running one. I mean, years ago I was very curious about the kink world, both I think just because I like alternative culture and I like things that are taboo. And I don't know if it's like a Catholic thing, but power play is very exciting to me. Dom, sub, slave, master, like these kinds of power play, which can occur in bondage, dominance, and sadomasochism, right? I decided to become a professional dominatrix, and for a few years I did do doming, which was fun, and I learned so much, and actually I learned a ton about psychology and about relationships and people.
I would imagine.
Like when you amplify the power dynamics, you can learn a lot about yourself.
So I don't know, we haven't spoken about this, so I don't know what your experience with that is. However, I do have some friends who have experienced that and told me it's not always a sexual exchange. There's maybe a sexual tension to it, you know what I mean? And there's some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Turn on. There's some sort of excitement that comes from it, but it's not always a sexual exchange. There's not always sexual touching and whatever there might be. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And I've never really, I haven't dived into that world, right? Maybe a spanking here and there or something like that. But I mean, there's a whole world to it. You know what I mean? I know people who are involved in that kind of stuff, and it's their world. It's like it's part of how they function with each other. Q for you saying, "Ooh, I don't know what's going on." And Grace Grell is out there hearing "Crack That Whip."
Yes,
Evo.
all those things are relevant, I think, to this. So, I mean, I share that piece of my past because I think, I mean, I sort of, and my Sad Intellectual Hotties podcast, we did talk about different types of dynamics, like a male sub and a female dom, or whatever, like sort of flipping the script a little bit of what a traditional like power dynamic would be. But the kink circle that I was running for a little while was just a group of women that could get together and talk about their sexual lives and their periods and their relationships and their partners, and we could talk about things that people weren't necessarily feel comfortable talking about with just their friends
at work or whatever. Yeah.
Definitely not at work.
yeah, of course. No, that makes sense. You want to find some people and create a little safe haven. You know what I mean?
And I think perhaps less about the having the experiences and more about I'm not a pearl clutcher. So like you can say some pretty radical, outrageous stuff to me. You
Mhm.
can say a lot of weird sex stuff to me, and I'm not gonna be like, I'm not gonna have that reaction because
Right.
more for me, I'm just really curious, and I'm just
Right.
like, that's not something I want to try, but cool, you're into that,
Right,
let me.
right, right, right. Oh, that's a thing. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Where does that line start? Where does kink begin? Like,
Well,
what's the most simplest thing that's considered kinky?
really anything that's not just penis and vagina, anything that's not genitals
Mhm.
is a fetish, basically. So
So
that
oral sex.
well, that's still penis and vagina kind of stuff,
Okay,
right?
okay.
So mouth, I think mouth can probably be considered,
Include that. Okay, okay.
but it's like feet,
Gotcha. Okay.
other body parts,
Right. Not the traditional things that are used in sex.
not the sex part.
The genitals, and so genitals for the sex part and the mouth for the kissing
Sure,
and
yeah,
the
and that's
genital.
kind of more like affection, mouth, maybe. I don't know. There's probably some fetishes having to do with mouths that
Okay.
I can't think of right now, but I'm sure they exist.
Right.
But yeah, like feet.
Sure.
So even like spanking, biting, hair
Yeah,
pulling,
yeah.
choking, and
Gotcha.
all that, I would say more what they consider to be vanilla people. Many have tried those things.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then from there, power play, dom, sub, what do you call it? Bondage,
Right.
ropes, tape,
Right.
handcuffs might be something that people who aren't necessarily in the
Right.
kink
Foot
world. Yeah,
fetish is one.
foot fetish, exactly.
Right.
Yes.
And I mean, listen, and as you probably, I've explored a little bit to see what's out there, right? And I mean, not
Sure,
like myself physically explored, but like, research and Google
sure,
and stuff.
of
And
course.
there's, I mean, I know all about littles, right? So there's
Yes.
people who relate as little kids, right? And they want to pretend that they're the kid and their partner is the mommy or the daddy, or you
Yeah,
know,
role playing.
yeah,
I mean,
role playing, right?
that can be that's something that I talked about on my podcast, but
Hmm.
that is something that can be incredibly therapeutic for
Hmm.
people.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
you had an upsetting or abusive upbringing or a neglectful parent, and now you are able to have this reparative adult
Hmm.
consenting role-playing relationship that it can soothe things inside of you that were never soothed.
Right. So it's interestingly enough that we're having this conversation because I was doing a podcast for a little while, and it started here with one of the viewers of the live stream, this girl Courtney. We started a podcast called The Strange and Wonderful, and we were interviewing people who had different kinds of relationships like that. Like she personally has a relationship with a doll, right? So she has
Yeah,
a girlfriend that's a doll, and she has a human boyfriend,
I love that.
or she did at the time. And what was cool about it is that when she told me about her idea for a show and about her relationship with her doll, I wasn't like, ooh, that's weird. Or I wasn't like, well, do you make out with, like, I didn't really care about that. I was just more into the psychology of it. I was
Yeah.
like, that's really interesting. Tell me, how does that even work? What's,
Mhm.
what is it all about? And so we've had conversations, and she just last night had, I guess she was at an event and she met a family unit, which
Mhm.
was a father and a mother and a little, who were like, they were all kind of spending time together. And
Playing
I think,
their little game
right,
together.
and the little was like actually a lot younger than them. She was like a 25-year-old, and they were probably in their 40s or 50s. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because of what you said. Both the both women in that relationship, because I guess the mother said she's also a little occasionally also,
Sure, yeah.
said that they recognized that it came from trauma that they had experienced,
Totally.
and that it was, like you said, it was almost like a way to soothe it, because it was like, here it is, I'm not being subject to it, I'm actually controlling it and wanting it, and that's
Yeah,
really interesting. I find
you
that really interesting.
the consensual agreement around the roles that you're going to play and the boundaries that whatever game you're playing, this is as far as I'm willing to go, this
Mhm.
is what I'm okay with, this is what it creates a lot of empowerment because of all that
Mhm.
negotiation and agreement. And obviously there are people who abuse the privileges,
Right.
and in general the community is really good about kicking them out of the community.
Mhm.
But in general, yeah, everyone's consenting to the whole process, and so
Right.
it's safe.
Right. Right. Totally. Totally. And I think that's important. And it's oddly enough, it's to me, it resonates as there's a spiritual thing there, you know, it's like,
Oh,
it's just a connection. And I think, so before we start wrapping up, I do want to also talk about, just kind of pick your brain about the idea of, tantric sexuality. Because I think, um, I don't know. I guess I feel like I think not a lot of people even know what that is. So why don't
Tantra
I
is,
have you define it?
sure. I mean, Tantra is the Eastern philosophy that comes from Buddhism, and it's about. I think of it as it's about all paths lead to center. So your physical senses is one pathway to God.
Mhm.
So in Tantra, everything is about like the love affair that occurs in the universe, and that sex is literally everywhere.
Mhm.
When you inhale, they say, like in Tantra, they say, when you're inhaling, that's actually God exhaling. And
Mhm.
when you exhale, that's God inhaling. So God
Mhm.
loves us so much that he wants to breathe our breath. Like,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
everything is always like this very sensual experience, the physical world.
Mm.
And pleasure is one way that we can meet God.
Mhm. Mhm. Trent
Kundalini.
Reznor. Trent Reznor.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Oh, exactly, like
Yeah.
literally that.
Yeah.
So, tantric sex is really about being extremely present in the pleasure, the physical sensation and pleasure that can occur, with anything. You're licking something, smelling something, touching it with your any part of your body.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's all about your senses.
Right. Right. So, and I don't even know why I brought it up or why I'm thinking about it, but I'm just in my head, I'm kind of coming up with, so tantra, or I guess tantric,
Tantra
sexuality,
Tantra is like the philosophy,
tantra,
like the lineage, and then tantric sex is
the
one of,
sexual, the
like,
sexual expression of it.
in Tantra, you can do it with breath, you can do it with food,
Right.
you can
I
like
gotcha. Okay.
literally.
I gotcha. Right. So I think the opposite is a more carnal version of sex, right?
Mhm.
Where it's the more physical, aspect of it, but tantra is almost like the more intellectual aspect of it,
Well,
or
it's that you can take it, you can like the philosophy of the fact that you can get completely lost in the physical element of it, and it's still a totally spiritual experience. Like
Mhm.
that pleasure and being present with pleasure is spiritual. There's no
Yeah,
separation.
right. Awesome. Well, you just validated a lot of thoughts in my head, so I appreciate
Great.
it.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, I think it's important. I think that, sexuality is just one aspect that, society has separated people from their own sexuality, and
Right. Well,
kind
it's
of put these, yeah, the way society puts sexuality out there in the media, it's just a totally different than reality, I feel like. So,
yeah, I mean, creative power is sexual power and creative power are the same.
yeah. Grace Grell says, transform the mundane into the divine.
That would be very tantric to do.
Yes, that's exactly right. I love that. Awesome. Well, I feel like I don't want to I don't want to get too crazy spicy. I wanted to get a little spicy. I feel like we did
Yeah, give a little taste.
a little taste. But that's great. I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much for agreeing
Likewise.
to come back. And again, I know we see each other out there in Facebook land, and we're always like cheering each other on. So
Yeah,
it's really,
likewise. Mhm.
I've been saying it the last couple of weeks, like, your vibe definitely attracts your tribe, and you start to
Yeah.
find people who just feel the same way. So thank you for being here. Do you have any words of wisdom, whether they be relationship wise or just, wisdom wise for my audience?
If you don't ask, the answer is always no.
I love that one. That's a great one.
It's not a
Awesome.
new one, but I feel like that's pertinent to the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Grace. Grace is out there saying great show.
Thanks, Grace.
I think she
you.
enjoyed your
Robert.
visit. Awesome. I'm going to pop you in the back room. I'm going to do my exhale, and we will see you again here soon on the live stream of consciousness, I'm sure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And Ninja Kitty saying thank you, Cassandra.
Thank you.
Sandra.
Cheers.
All right. Wow. All right. You guys know the exercise. I should probably require you guys to do it with me from now on. So starting now, it's not just me that's doing my gratitude exhale. Take a nice inhale of everything we just experienced and release it and feel good about everything that just happened. We just had an amazing hour of intentional conversation about consciousness and love and relationships. I've got 2 weeks lined up. I've been thinking about maybe taking a break after these 2 weeks, but I want to tell you the next 2 weeks I have Danielle Lipton lined up, who just put out a book called My Ascension Guide, and she is a channel. She is a channel for the star people and for the Arcturians, so she's very connected cosmically. She's going to be my guest next week. We're going to talk about her book and everything she's doing, and then the next week I have Larry Azevedo. So I have taken on StreamYard Collab, and I've been digging through people's profiles, and Larry Azevedo is actually a presidential candidate. So somebody from California, I believe, who decided he wanted to run for president, which I love because I think we definitely need a change. We need somebody who is not like anything we've had before, new ideas. So I'm hoping that he's somebody who I'll like and actually make me want to go out and vote for somebody who I'll be excited about. And Rob is out there saying Larry's very interesting. He was on the Q for You podcast, I believe last week. Ninja Kitty, another amazing show. Thank you, Ninja Kitty. It's always amazing because you're here too. I just want you to know that if you weren't here, it wouldn't be as amazing. So thanks for being here. I will see you guys next week. I'll be back on Thursday. Peace.